I decided recently to rewatch Boy Meets World, a sitcom from the 90s that I used to love. One of the reasons I loved it is because it has one of my favorite fictional couples of all time. No, not Corey and Topanga. I'm talking about Shawn and Angela. I'm going to talk about that for a little while. That's what this video is about. But before that, please give me just a literal minute to talk about Nebula. Nebula, as you may or may not know, is a creator-owned streaming video platform featuring many smart video makers, many of which are probably already your favorites on YouTube. We built Nebula so that we could have a platform to create and share our work without having to worry about things like demonetization or algorithms. You can watch our YouTube videos ad-free on Nebula, or you can check out one of the many Nebula originals that you can't find on YouTube or anywhere else for that matter. To help us accomplish our goals, we've partnered with CuriosityStream, a streaming service with thousands of amazing documentaries and nonfiction titles, and also the sponsor of this video. CuriosityStream has a lot of thought-provoking content, like the Bright Now series that features interesting stories about everything from coffee to the Amazon rainforest. We think CuriosityStream is a perfect companion to the intriguing stuff you'll find on Nebula. So if you sign up at curiositystream.com/T1J and use my code T1J, you'll also get access to Nebula absolutely free. And CuriosityStream is offering a special deal to my subscribers where you can get 26% off an annual plan, bringing the total to less than $15 for a full year of both CuriosityStream and Nebula. It's a pretty good deal. Why don't you check it out? Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
When I was growing up, I loved Boy Meets World. It might have even been my favorite show for at least a little while. It's hard to explain why, but I think it just came out at the right time for me. It was a show about teenagers/young adults trying to figure out life and relationships. And at the time, I was a teenager/young adult trying to figure out life and relationships. If you've been following me for a while, you might know that I really love sitcoms. And I don't mean like I love a lot of sitcoms. I mean, I love all of them. I love the genre. I can't entirely explain why. I mean, part of it is obviously the fact that I love laughing and jokes and comedic writing, but clearly some sitcoms are funnier than others and some honestly aren't that funny at all. But I still love them, even the bad and mediocre ones.
Bazinga.
Even Boy Meets World is not really that laugh out loud funny until the later seasons. And even then, almost all the laughs come from Eric, who is basically a cartoon character by that point. But I still loved it. I was so invested in those characters and their stories. There's something about the format of a TV sitcom that I find really compelling, especially sitcoms from the 80s and 90s. Like, I love sitcoms way more than comedy movies or other types of comedic media. Of course, TV fiction has an opportunity to tell long-form stories and develop characters over time, which I appreciate, but other genres can do that as well. I think unlike most dramatic TV shows, which tend to focus heavily around plot and setting, sitcoms almost always zero in on characters and their relationships with each other. And that's why I loved Boy Meets World. The characters and their relationships and how they change and grow over time was very intriguing to me as a young man who was interested in that sort of thing. Rewatching it as a full-fledged adult, I'm definitely less invested in the lives of these young people than I was back then. It's a little less relatable now. I barely remember high school and college at this point, which is making me feel old, so I will move on. And I gotta say, it feels a little creepy watching teenagers making out, which happens in almost every episode. Also, there are a lot of moments where teenage performers have suggestive scenes with adult performers who are playing teenagers, which I understand the necessity of, but it's still pretty cringe. Even the actors who play Shawn and Angela, who this whole video is about, have a 10-year age gap, which is something I didn't know before working on this video, but you can actually tell in some of the earlier episodes, and it's so weird. Even so, I've come to really appreciate what was actually unique about this show, and I still love the little story they told, even though it's basically about kids. So if you've never watched the show, Boy Meets World is a family-friendly sitcom about the life of Corey Matthews, played by Ben Savage. He's a mischievous, neurotic teenage boy from the suburbs of Philadelphia. We watch him grow over 7 seasons from 7th grade all the way to his 2nd year in college. Initially, he lives with his compassionate and understanding parents, Amy and Alan, his dim-witted but good-hearted older brother, Eric, and his little sister, Morgan, who mainly exists to be cute and deliver funny one-liners. Seriously, she's like the funniest character in the first season.
Aren't you going to invite me to have tea with you?
Corey's also joined in his adventures by his troubled but loyal best friend, Shawn, and his flower child turned overachiever girlfriend, Topanga, whose name was, I think, a joke that they had to stick with when she eventually became a main character. The kids and even occasionally the adults also receive advice and wisdom from Corey's neighbor and school teacher, Mr. George Feeney, another character that is surprisingly funny. And by the end, the main cast is rounded out with the additions of Eric's college friends, Jack and Rachel, as well as Topanga's best friend and Shawn's love interest, Angela. There's also a bunch of recurring side characters, Minkus, Frankie, the Dean, and so on, but we don't got time for all that. If you want to know more about the show as a whole, I know just where to send you, but I'll tell you about that at the end. Corey means well, but he can't seem to stay out of trouble. I mean, if I'm being real, he's kind of the worst. He's stubborn and strong-willed, and he's always interfering in other people's lives. But to be fair, that's because he has deep convictions that he's always prepared to stand up for. And he always ends up doing the right thing at the end of the day due to the abundance of positive influences in his life. It's one of those shows where almost every conflict could be solved with like a single conversation. But misunderstandings and overreactions are the fuel that even allow sitcoms to exist. The premise of a mischievous but well-meaning suburban kid is not really unique. That's literally Leave It to Beaver. That's kind of the idea of most family-oriented sitcoms. The characters run into some hijinks, learn some life lessons, and everything is resolved and back to normal by the end of the episode. Or by the end of the 2-parter if it's one of those special to-be-continued episodes. And that's kind of how Boy Meets World is at the beginning, but as you watch more episodes, you realize that the show might be offering a different perspective than most family sitcoms. For one, by the 5th season, the show could even hardly be called a family sitcom anymore. By then, it had evolved into a show about young adults and their friendships and romantic relationships. And by the middle of the 6th season, it's a full-on soap opera. Almost every episode is kind of sad or dramatic. But even in the earlier seasons, it arguably had somewhat of a rebuttal to the classic Leave It to Beaver formula. Sure, everything seems to work out for Corey because his family's well off and he has a lot of emotional support. But Corey is not the only character whose story we follow. There's also this guy that I mentioned before, Corey's best friend, Shawn Hunter, played by Ryder Strong. Full name, Ryder King Strong. And I mean, that's a name, isn't it? We learned in the 2nd season that unlike Corey, Shawn's family is poor and dysfunctional, and his general life trajectory seems bleak. The class and culture differences between Corey and Shawn is a constant tension between them and leads to several conflicts and fallings out between the two. On a normal suburban family sitcom, we might meet a poor or struggling kid in one of those very special episodes and then never hear about them again. But Shawn is one of the main characters. His issues are a large and ongoing part of the show all the way to the end. Boy Meets World often tackled serious problems like this, but it did it in a way that seemed more honest than typical sitcoms from that era. And as the target audience for the show grew older, the topics and discussions became more candid. For example, in season 2, Corey meets a very clingy and aggressive girl, and it's implied but not stated outright that she seeks love and approval because she was abandoned by her father. But in season 4, the boys meet a girl who is being physically abused by her father, and this is discussed and shown pretty openly. And while both episodes do end on a hopeful note, nothing is neatly tied up or fully resolved. We don't truly know if either of those girls are going to be all right. There's a lot of episodes like that, actually, that end in uncertainty. And I think that uncertainty is a bold thing that a lot of family-oriented sitcoms from the 90s and before tended to avoid. But again, I think it's more honest. Like, Boy Meets World doesn't usually suggest that people's deepest issues can be solved overnight. And it even acknowledges the privilege that people like Corey Matthews have that allows them to avoid many of the consequences that those issues create for less fortunate people. And I respect that they did that.
Touch it. Get some dirt on your hands. Try and see what average looked like from here. To me, average was a dream.
But in my opinion, this whole idea is grounded within the character of Shawn. The season 2 episode, The Wrong Side of the Tracks, where we first learn that Shawn is poor, is the first episode of the series to not have an unambiguously happy or hopeful ending. At the end of the episode, much like those girls, we don't know if Shawn's gonna be all right. And spoiler, he kind of can't catch a break throughout the entire run of the show, which is sad, but real for a lot of people. His parents abandoned him multiple times. He can't figure out any of his personal relationships. And when it looks like he's finally gonna reconcile with his father, the dude fucking dies. Yeah, Shawn can't catch a break. But in my opinion, the story of Shawn is the most interesting thing on the show. Because even though he's dealt a pretty bad hand, we still see him grow and mature. And by the end, we have hope that he'll make it out all right. Shawn is charismatic and good looking, which makes him incredibly popular with the girls at his school. But his inner demons and emotional immaturity ensures that none of these relationships last more than a couple weeks. But then in season 5, we meet Angela. Now, it sucks that we have to wait this long to meet Angela because Angela is the best character on Boy Meets World. Now, you might say I'm biased because she's black, and you'd probably be right. But it's not just that she's black, it's that she's like black. It's hard to explain because I don't want people to think that I'm referencing cliches and stereotypes, but black characters in white TV shows are usually either inauthentic minority tropes like the sassy best friend or the token comic relief, or there's some blank slate where the character's blackness isn't really relevant and you could change the race of the character and it wouldn't affect much. But Angela's neither of those in my opinion. She's a fully realized, complex character, and her blackness is an important part of that. I appreciate that the showrunners and directors allowed Trina McGee to perform the character in an authentic way and didn't try to sterilize the performance for white audiences. They let her rock culturally accurate fashion and hairstyles, which apparently she did herself, and she was the sassy best friend sometimes, but she was also sometimes sweet and sometimes vulnerable, sometimes sad, sometimes tough. I'm saying she was a believable, complex black woman on TV, which was dope. I've talked before about how even though I like a lot of white sitcoms, I often don't particularly relate to them. Well, Angela gave me something to personally relate to in Boy Meets World, which only further increased my love for the show. I can only imagine how it felt for black girls. Before Angela was added to the cast, race was almost never mentioned on the show. But after she joined, the writers decided not to ignore the fact that she was black and had the characters acknowledge it on several occasions.
I'm trying to protect you, you short little white girl.
Which sometimes doesn't happen in other shows. Like, did they ever verbally acknowledge on Friends that Charlie Wheeler was black? It's been a long time, so I'm not really sure, but I don't think so. On Boy Meets World, it was never a major part of the plot and usually played for a joke, but at least they acknowledged it. Because black people generally don't have the luxury of ignoring race. And I don't want to give the show more credit than what is due on this. It's a very minor thing, but I think it was cool for them to sprinkle a little of that in. It just made the character seem more real. If Angela wasn't black, that would have fundamentally changed the show, in my opinion. Could they have gotten a white girl to deliver Angela's lines and tell the same story? I mean, yeah, I guess, but it wouldn't have been as good. I think Angela being simultaneously very similar and very different from Shawn is part of what makes their relationship so compelling. Interracial relationships were pretty uncommon on TV at the time. I mean, they're arguably still kind of uncommon now. And especially when the race or culture difference is not like the story. Like, at no point in Boy Meets World was it ever a source of conflict or even celebration that Shawn and Angela were different races. But I did notice that outside of Shawn, Angela is only shown dating black dudes, which seems intentional. This could be perceived as a black woman choosing the white protagonist over the lesser black suitors, which sounds a little disappointing by today's standards. But I think at the time, an ongoing interracial relationship was seen as a more progressive step forward for media. I feel like people don't really give a fuck about that anymore, though. The most charitable interpretation is simply that people tend to date within their own race. And that's probably what Angela did before she met Shawn. Now, apparently, being one of the only black people on the set wasn't always easy for Trina McGee. She apparently dealt with being excluded from events and receiving insensitive comments, which really sucks, and I hate that that was happening behind the scenes of this show that I loved. But it seems that decades later, everyone has made peace with each other, and I hope that's actually the case. I said before how Corey is kind of the worst, and one of the reasons I loved Angela so much was because she was the only one of Corey's friends that ever called him out on his bullshit. In fact, her first spoken dialogue on the show is her setting Corey straight. Before Angela was added to the show, Topanga kind of played the role of the foil to Corey and Shawn's goofiness, but ultimately Topanga just enabled and encouraged their schemes and was shown to freak out herself from time to time. Angela, on the other hand, is pretty much the only consistently reasonable person in their friend group and often has to help the other characters come to their senses. The rational, sensible characters are almost always my favorite characters in any media. Lisa, Hermione, fucking Captain America. But Angela's got her own baggage as well, and that's probably what drew her to Shawn in the first place. Just like Shawn, Angela's mother abandoned her, which left her scared to commit to a relationship and even more terrified at the prospect of being a mother herself. And just like Shawn, Angela has a strained relationship with her father, although in her case it's because he's a military man who's always traveling and is rarely around. Unfortunately, the insecurities that helped her relate to Shawn are also the thing that ultimately dooms their relationship. When Shawn and Angela first get together, Shawn is still in his playboy years and doesn't intend to stay with her for more than 2 weeks. And we can assume that Angela is okay with this due to her own relationship hangups. But Shawn learns pretty quickly that Angela has qualities that he could appreciate in a long-term partner. We see Shawn develop over the course of 5 seasons from a boy who only cares about kissing every pretty girl he sees to a young man capable of monogamous love. That's over 100 episodes, so I can't cover it all, but there are key moments of evolution in Shawn's life that led him to this point. At the end of season 2, after being left behind by his parents, Shawn is taken in by his English teacher, Mr. Jonathan Turner. At this point, Mr. Turner is the only person outside of Corey who seems to give a shit about Shawn, and he becomes somewhat of a father figure. Having a person in his life who cares for him and doesn't run away as soon as things get hard helps Shawn learn to trust people who say they love him. In the season 3 episode, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, Shawn is forced to reconcile with his ladies' man reputation when he develops a serious crush on his schoolmate Dana. He learns that girls are scared to seriously date him because they know they'll get their heart broken. After getting advice from Topanga and Mr. Turner, however, Shawn decides to put real effort into learning to become a good boyfriend. We don't hear much about Dana after that, but it's later revealed that Shawn eventually broke up with her and ended up breaking her heart anyway. And in fact, after Shawn falls for Angela, Dana returns along with 2 of Shawn's other exes, hoping to save Angela from the same fate. The methods they use to do this are a bit extreme. I mean, it's a sitcom, what are you gonna do? But these little criminals did succeed in teaching Shawn that merely liking someone a lot is not the only necessary aspect of a successful relationship. And because of this lesson, Shawn is able to maintain a happy, albeit somewhat superficial, relationship with Angela for a decent amount of time. Probably the biggest contributing factor to Shawn's romantic evolution is his emotional stock in the love between his friends Corey and Topanga. Corey and Topanga get together in season 3, and outside of a couple temporary hiccups, they're pretty much together and deeply in love throughout the whole series. They're presented as having an almost magical love that transcends all time and logic and destines them to be together forever. And Shawn leans on their relationships as an ongoing hope that maybe true love is available to him as well.
Why can't we be Corey and Topanga?
When Corey and Topanga do briefly break up, Shawn is more devastated than they are. Putting so much stock into Corey and Topanga, though, was one of Shawn's fateful mistakes, I think. Corey and Topanga were both privileged, emotionally stable kids with a strong support system. They always knew they would be safe and taken care of no matter what happens. Shawn doesn't have that kind of advantage. His emotional state is fractured. When he puts his heart on the line, he risks doing serious damage to his mental well-being. It's a bad idea for him to use his friends as a blueprint for his own life. When all the characters finally make it to college in the 6th season, Shawn briefly reverts to his old ways and tells Angela that they should take this opportunity to see what's out there and meet new people. Which is honestly fair. It's unlikely for most people to find their perfect match in high school, and college is the perfect time to meet people and expand your horizons. There aren't that many Corys and Topangas out there. But in reality, this was just Shawn pushing Angela away because he still feels scared of a real adult relationship. And Angela is deeply hurt by this, but she pretends to be okay with it, in large part because she's also afraid. And as I mentioned, they're afraid for the same reasons. They both have mommy and daddy issues. Missing parents, especially mothers, was actually a pretty common trope from 80s and 90s sitcoms. Different Strokes, Punky Brewster, Full House, Blossom, they all featured kids with dead or absentee parents. Most critics conclude that this was TV's way of dealing with the emerging topic of divorce, which was something that was rarely talked about back then. Shawn eventually realizes that he wants to be with Angela, but by that point, she's had enough of the emotional roller coaster and rejects him, even though she clearly loves him. I hope you can see how sweet but toxic Shawn and Angela's relationship was. They're genuinely in love, but too young and too broken to succeed as a couple. But the show sets you up to root for them because we know they care about each other and want to be together. And we've seen Cory and Topanga overcome everything life has thrown at them. And their relationship was appealing to a lot of people because if Shawn and Angela can work it out, that means even flawed people with emotional baggage can still find love and be happy. Shawn and Angela actually get back together in the season 7 episode Angela's Men when Angela's father comes to visit her at college and helps her come to terms with the fact that she doesn't have to go down the same path as her mother. This happens in the middle of the final season, so on first watch, you might think this is the conclusion of the Shawn and Angela story. But as the title of this video suggests, this would be short-lived. Before this rewatch, I remember being crushed at the ending of Shawn and Angela's story in Boy Meets World. But seeing it again, I think it was a sweet and sensible ending. Angela's father returns and asks her to go to Europe with him for a year. Shawn knows that a full year apart could mean the end of their relationship, but ultimately he steps aside and lets her go because he knows that spending more time with her father is something that will help Angela heal as a person, and he knows that it's an opportunity that he wishes he had with his own father. Shawn and Angela were a volatile couple, two flawed, insecure, damaged people who genuinely loved each other but were too incomplete individually to ever make it work together. So when one of them had a real opportunity for healing, it was worth giving up the relationship to allow that to happen. I think that if they stayed together, they would have just continued on this dramatic emotional roller coaster until they ended up hating each other probably. Just like many episodes, the series as a whole ends with uncertainty. We didn't really know if Angela and Shawn would ever get back together. The creators of Boy Meets World, Michael Jacobs and April Kelly, would eventually destroy our headcanon 16 years later with the sequel series Girl Meets World. Now that's a whole nother show, so I don't want to get too detailed, but it's revealed that Angela has moved on with her life and gotten married. Fans of Boy Meets World did not like this. Michael Jacobs has stated that he has received a lot of negative feedback for his decision not to have Angela and Shawn end up together. But personally, I think it makes sense. I think one of the reasons I like this story so much is because it mirrors things that I've experienced in my own life. I've been through a couple of relationships that I definitely wasn't ready for at the time, and because of that, they crashed and burned. But I'm still glad I went through them because they taught me more about myself and how to treat people. And because Angela and Shawn taught each other how to give and to receive love in a healthier way, they were both able to eventually find lasting relationships. Now in this video, I focused on one relationship that I find interesting, but there is so much that you can say about Boy Meets World. The Cory and Topanga story is also cool. There are several episodes that take place in the past and alternate timelines and shit, and a surprising number of musical performances. Like I was saying before, by the end of the show, Eric has become a full-on cartoon character. Even though he starts the series as just a normal kid, I mean, that's worth talking about. I'd love to do a video about that. In fact, I think I will, but I'll put it on Nebula and I'll drop a link when it's live. Boy Meets World was a popular show that a lot of people have fond memories of. If you do want to know more about the show in general, I have a message from my fellow YouTube essayist, Jose, that you might be interested in.
Hey, this is Jose. Much like T1J, I am also a fan of classic sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, and if you want to learn more about Boy Meets World from its humble beginnings to its enduring legacy, you can check out my video on the subject after finishing this one.
So yeah, go check out his video. I'll drop a link for you. And if you're not familiar with Jose, you should check out his other videos as well. They're dope. So yeah, I don't know, I just really love Shawn and Angela. It's not the happiest story, but it's real, or at least as real as you could get on primetime ABC. That's just me though. What do you think? Quick shout outs to the homies Stephanie Dunlap, Tim Lash, KT, and Philip Manth. Thanks for supporting the channel, and keep an eye out for that Eric Matthews video on Nebula. Stay Heiko, bye bye.